Hi, in this video, I'm excited to show you a number of use cases and features of XRelay, a powerful MIDI utility for Macs for Live. To install XRelay, we suggest dragging it to your user library and into your presets and the appropriate, in this case MIDI, Mac's MIDI effect subfolder. This ensures it will be ingested into Live's browser for future searches. For the purposes of this demonstration, I've added this MFA Utilities folder to my places, and there I can find XRelay, which is a MIDI effect, and therefore must be added to MIDI tracks only prior to any instrument which will translate that MIDI into sound. So I'll drag XRelay before this instance of the wavetable. And we can see in default, it is in node mode, meaning it's not going to send MIDI anywhere. It's going to receive MIDI from a source, in this case, by default, the MIDI in. And that's what we're going to look at first. Now, because it's in global mode, it's receiving this scale and key from an instance of Global Hub, which we have another video on all the features of. So check the link down below. For starters, let's just see what XRelay can do without intercepting MIDI from any relay point, just purely as a MIDI utility. So I've got a few different MIDI clips going here. And by default, I can transpose within the key and scale, of course, in semitones, or rather usefully, in octaves. So that's nice. I can also simply mute the MIDI. Or hold it, much like a sustain pedal. And this is all MIDI mappable. At bottom, we have a display showing us the current MIDI note and velocity, which I can click to flush any stuck notes if I encounter any at any point. Finally, at the bottom, we have our offset timing, which works with the same base rate multiplier timing combination as all of our other devices. The default is 16th notes, and time 0 means no offset, but if I increase this, now it's offset by a 16th, now an 8th, and these changes synchronize at the next quarter note of the global transport. So just playing around with the offset and the octave can yield a lot of fun results. I can also toggle into a millisecond offset if I wish. If you're looking for something a little bit less metrical. And if I switch back, it will inherit the nearest interval timing. So let's get back to 16th notes, shall we? Now I can use the MIDI from this muted transposer clip to govern or guide the MIDI being played by the wavetable in a number of ways. So first of all, I will unmute. So we've got a simple descending half note melody, and if I go to the operator track, you can see I've got an instance of XRelay in relay mode. So if I toggle to node, it looks the same as the other instance. If I toggle into relay mode, it allows me to select a conduit. By default, it won't be sending on any conduit. It must be selected. This is to avoid unwanted traffic on the same MIDI channel. So I'm going to select relay 1, and now if I go back to the wavetable, I can set the source to not be the incoming MIDI from the clip, but to relay 1. And now we can see it playing that same descending progression because relay is selected. If I go back to this menu here, which is now activated once a relay source has been selected, I can set it back to track mode, and it's much the same as before. Nothing is really happening. But now that a relay is being received, I can tell it to transpose from that relay. And this is all retained in that Aeolian minor scale. I can also transpose it and merge it with the incoming MIDI. So now we're hearing the first held note there, which with the filter envelope programmed on this instance of wavetable isn't super audible. But we can also merge and not transpose. And if I go here, back to the relay, this is going to change the octave that's being sent. I can also offset what's being sent. And this is being all merged on that main wavetable track. We can also stop sending MIDI, but it's not the same as muting the MIDI. It's just not sending to any nodes that are receiving on that relay channel. Unlike mute, which will just stop it from proceeding to the next device. So send and mute work independently of one another. One more fun thing I can do before examining some of the other modes is go to the advanced settings here and specify only certain note ranges that will go out from the device. But likewise, we can use these to constrain the notes that will be sent via the relay. So now we're only hearing the two lowest notes of that descending transposer pattern. In other words, notes that are below F3. We can also constrain by velocity if desired. So those are the advanced modes. Which in node mode also allows me to toggle the transposition of received note pitches. So we can invert them. This is useful for creating all kinds of instant counterpoint. So it's transposing by an inverted array of MIDI note pitches. To show the last two modes of node and how it can interact with or receive MIDI from any of the 64 relay points, I'm going to switch to this gapped clip, which has some long rests. So each node is only a quarter note followed by a quarter note rest. And if I go back to the node that's receiving on that relay channel, I can set it to a gate mode. Now it's only playing notes while the quarter notes are held from the incoming MIDI. So we can start to program all kinds of dynamic interrelationships. We can also gate without transposing. we can also switch to a sidechain, which is the inverse of gate mode. It's a MIDI sidechain so that these notes, whatever is coming through the track of node, will only play between the node on messages. If I switch to this rapid clip, which has a lot more notes, we might hear it a little more easily. And I'll transpose it. And you can see now that it's only playing sidechained to the notes in the gaps between them, which I will toggle the merge on for a moment. So you can hear the other note coming through. Maybe I'll bring the octave down to really... And this is because it's inverted, pulling the octave of transposition up on the other track, which I neglected to consider. So that's merged and transposed. And I'll switch back to the gate mode with the transposition on. So what would otherwise be a full 16th note sort of arpeggiated riff becomes something a little more staggered and interacting with the gapped notes of the operator, which I will now re-enable. So now we've got this sort of automated call and response with the side and the optional transposition. So I think it could be interesting to look at a more complex version of this with a busier transposition pattern. And what I will do is select that only the highest notes coming out of the relay will induce anything. And in fact, I'm just going to set this to the relay. So now it's only doubling up on those notes above F2. But where it gets interesting is I can transpose those and offset them. Let's offset them by 1/8 note. Maybe 16th note would be more interesting. That's offset by 3/16 notes. Just those two notes that are above the lowest range being transposed by an octave and offset. So the only source of the MIDI is this operator riff. I can stop that main MIDI clip and it does nothing because we are receiving MIDI from the relay. This relay allows us to pipe MIDI to and from anywhere in our set. And let's look at a couple more examples of this. I have a bass ARP here playing through an analog. And it's a very simple bass pattern, but I would like to sidechain it from the kick on the drums. There are a few ways to do this, but the first thing I must do is, of course, put an instance of X relay on this track. And because X relay can be inserted anywhere, I've already got one inserted on just the kick here. And I've set it to send on relay conduit 2. And I've got an offset there, which I'll explain later. For now, I'll turn the offset off. Otherwise, everything is normal here, although being a drum, I might want to lock it to a chromatic key so that if the note happened to fall outside of this particular scale and key, it won't be removed. And then I'll go back and let's see, relay 2, right? So let's go back to analog and set it to receive on relay 2. But we do not want to be playing the note of that kick drum. I want to sidechain to it. And because X relay and no MIDI effects in live can see the future, as it were, they can be delayed, but they cannot be played before, I must go to the kit, and that is the reason for my offset, to really get it side chaining. With the kick, I find I need to offset it to what ends up being 1/16 before where the kicks actually fall, so that the note off messages are received at the appropriate interval. So now you're seeing that we can place multiple instances of X relay on a track. We can place it on chains of a drum rack, MIDI effect rack, or instrument rack, and we can use more than one node to intercept different relay points on the same track. So I'm going to place another instance of node and set it to relay 1, and I do want it to play the track, and I'm just going to go and play that transposer now. And I've got all this other stuff going on here, so I'll just mute those 2 tracks and go back to analog and turn the transpose on. So I've got this instance of X relay receiving the kick drum on relay 2 in sidechain mode. So now I'm doing a MIDI sidechain, and then I've got this next instance of X relay receiving the transposition pattern from relay 1 set to play the MIDI of this track and transpose it. So we can continue adding influences from different relays on any one of the up to 64 different relay conduits available. Finally, I think I'll go back to the rapid pattern here on the wavetable, which I should re-enable. And I think I'm just going to start fresh, or actually, never mind. I like this particular offset transposition thing going on. I'm going to just group it to a rack. And then if I go to the chain view, maybe I'll rename it high offset. And then I'll just drag another instance of X relay to another chain. And by default, it's not doing anything, but it is combining it with this high offset. I think I'll just call it through. And I think I'll transpose this one down 1 octave. Or maybe 2. And then I'm going to stack another instance of X relay. And this one, I'm going to again set it to receive on relay 1. And that high offset is 2. This one I'll do offset by 1. And whoops, here we go. Offset this by 1. And perhaps I could invert it. And I could have all these side chaining to each other. It goes on and on. With up to 64 relay conduits, we can embed all kinds of dynamic interrelationships between otherwise unrelated MIDI components anywhere in a project.